Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers, here's a quick heads up to save the date, December 1st through 4th, for our Thriving Farmer Summit, Value Added. If you're looking to add income to your farm with simple, proven strategies, go to www.farmsummits.com and drop your email. Our summit series have been viewed by over 100,000 farmers and get rave 5-star reviews. In this summit, we'll share detailed strategies for farm ferments, herbal foraging, tinctures, pickles, farm kitchens, foodscaping, mushroom jerky and mushroom kits, developing add-on shares for your CSA, how to publish books with your farm story, starting your own USDA processing plant, and starting a farmer co-op. Over 35 speakers are sharing their wisdom. Go to farmsummits.com to reserve your spot today. Thanks to Harvest Host for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Harvest Host provides a cost-free opportunity for small businesses and farms to increase revenue simply by inviting self-contained RV members to stay one night on their property. In return, members patronize or donate to the business. Well-established hosts are reporting on an average of $15,000 in annual additional revenue. For more information on how you can become a host or a member, contact Harvest Hosts today at harvesthosts.com. Hey, Thriving Farmers, Michael Kilpatrick here with another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. And today our guest is Julie Guthman. Julie Guthman is a geographer and professor of sociology at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where she conducts research on the conditions of possibility for food system transformation in the U.S. Her most recent book, Wilted: Pathogens, Chemicals, Fragile Future of the Strawberry Industry, was a recipient of the 2020 American Association of Geographers Meridian Award for outstanding scholarly work in geography. Her prior publications include 2 multi-award-winning monographs, an edited collection, about 50 peer-reviewed journal articles, and dozens of other book chapters, book reviews, commentaries, and public-facing pieces. Currently, she is the principal investigator of the UC AFTER project, a multi-campus collaboration exploring Silicon Valley's recent forays into food and agriculture. Julie doesn't farm, but she does like to eat. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you have spent your life researching, and is that something you always wanted to do from school, or how did you kind of start diving into doing this?
Actually, this was my 3rd career. I did not start off thinking I would be a professor or a researcher, but it all comes around. I started off doing community organizing after college, and thereafter I worked in nonprofit financial management. And then really I was traveling a lot, and I should say that when I had been an organizer, I had worked a lot in California's agricultural zones, and I'd always been really curious about agriculture. And my father was a health food nut from the 50s, and so I had always grown up with someone who talked a lot about food and had a lot of food advice. So when I decided for various reasons to go back for a PhD fairly late into life, I mean, I was in my mid-30s, I didn't really know that I was going to work on agriculture and food, but it was in the context of taking a seminar on the restructuring of the global food system that I decided to work on food. And the story there is we were asked to do group projects on some world food commodity, and my team asked our professor, do you mind if we do something on something more regional or local? Can we work on like salad mix or organics in California? And he was all for that. And so this was the I want to say, was it late 80s or early 90s? It was late 80s.
Okay.
No, that's not correct. It was early 90s. So we, there was 3 of us in this group, and we just started talking to farmers around the Central Coast area, Santa Cruz, Salinas, and some further afield. And we talked to suppliers and retailers, and we realized that really no one had written any social science work on organics, and that plunged us in. And that became it ended up being my dissertation project and the basis of my first book. So again, it all kind of came around because my father had been very much into organics. He had followed people in the Soil Association. Never something I thought I would do as a profession, which is to do research on food and agriculture. And here I am 25 years later and still doing it.
So what does your research process look like?
What does my research process look like? Well, I am not an agronomist or a soil scientist. I don't do scientific studies of food and agriculture. I'm a social scientist. That means I spend a lot of time looking at what people say about what they're doing, and so in these days I might look at websites or whatever, or my current project where we're looking at Silicon Valley, we're going to events, and I might go to events and see what people are saying. But a big basis of my research has been interviews, talking to farmers or activists or whoever about their perspectives, motivations, thoughts about what they're doing. So that's the basis of most of my research. It's called qualitative social science research.
Okay. Now, strawberries, because that's your most recent book. What caused you to write a book about strawberries?
Well, I've been interested in strawberries since I first started doing research on organics in the early 90s. And part of it is because one of the conclusions I found in my first book, which was called Agrarian Dreams, is that a lot of the movement into organics among California farmers was responding to the high land values of California and the need to get more revenue from any given piece of land. And so they were moving from commodity crops into organics, maybe with something in between, maybe, a specialty crop as opposed to cotton, and then going to organics because they needed to make more money. But in turn, I argued that the organics was actually contributing to high land values as well, because if you can grow organic, if it's, you have a certified piece of land, that might raise the cost of land. So I kind of came to that conclusion of this kind of land is this kind of, so I came across land as this really important variable to think about and what shapes farming practices and how it affects what can be done. And part of that conclusion came from, I think what this is going, again, this is going way back to my earlier research. One of the first places I visited doing interviews was I was interviewing people up in Napa, and I was thinking, why are people growing organics in this extraordinarily valuable agricultural land, right? Where you can grow these very expensive, grapes for very expensive wines. And it occurred to me that organics was allowing people to hold on to that kind of land. And then strawberry was kind of the same thing, because strawberries are grown abutting urban environments where there's a lot of pressure on land values. So and strawberries are a very, very high value crop. So that was my original motivation for working on strawberries, but then it was reignited about 12 years ago now, when there were this huge battle over the registration of the soil fumigant methyl iodide. This took place in California. So methyl iodide was brought on the market, or attempted to be brought on the market, to replace methyl bromide, which was the chemical most widely and deeply used in California strawberries. It made California's, so methyl iodide was introduced to replace methyl bromide. And methyl bromide was a chemical on which the strawberry industry was built as a way to control soil pathogens as well as weeds and nematodes. And so, but methyl bromide was an ozone was designated an ozone depleting substance by the International Montreal Protocol. And so, so that really was threatening the strawberry industry. And for a long time, the US was able to defer a phase out of methyl bromide because the strawberry industry lobbied very hard to have that. But the writing was on the wall that methyl bromide was going to be disallowed. And so people were desperately looking for a replacement for methyl bromide, and they hit upon methyl iodide. That is a chemical had been around, but a researcher at UC Riverside reintroduced it and licensed it to Arista Life Sciences. And it was extremely controversial because unlike methyl bromide, which is an ozone depleting substance, would dissipate into the atmosphere, methyl iodide would stay closer to the ground. Good for the atmosphere, but not good for the people who are around the fumigation.
Yeah.
So farm workers and neighbors and schools, hospitals, whatever. So a big battle to not allow California's Department of Pesticide Regulation to register it. And what was intriguing to me about this battle is it was a wide coalition of anti-pesticide activists and public health activists and teachers and foodies and farm workers. And I've been studying food movements for a while, and I found that combination of stakeholders to be really unusual and coming together to fight a big battle over regulation as opposed to just like create an alternative like organics. So I was really intrigued by that, and that's what got me into researching strawberries, is understanding the regulatory battles around methyl bromide, and then thereafter chloropicrin as well, because chloropicrin was designated a toxic air contaminant.
So then, I mean, and both of those chemicals are quite, they respiratory illness, lung tumors, miscarriages, birth defects, thyroid hormone, carcinogens, neurotoxins. So these are just not good things. But our thirst for strawberries as a nation has caused this to just gotten almost turned to a blind eye because of the profit potential on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, they're all these. I mean, strawberries are a really pesticide intensive crop, and my research was really about the soil fumigants, which don't even affect. They're not on the. I want to be clear, they're not on the crop. They're not. There's no residues of soil fumigants. The soil fumigants go into the ground pre-plant to kill soil-borne pathogens. But yeah, I mean, once you can fumigate and knock out these soil pathogens that in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s were really badly affecting strawberry growers, you wouldn't have to rotate strawberries from one piece of land to another. You can grow strawberries year after year on the same block, right? Which is huge, right? Because if they're a high value crop and otherwise you're rotating it with a lower value crop, if you can grow it on the same crop on the same block year after year, you're going to be much more profitable. But then a bunch of other things kicked in. So starting in the 1940s, University of California ag researchers, plant breeders, had been, I should say the University of California was brought on to deal with the many problems that strawberry growers were facing as they were becoming a little bit more of an industry in the 30s and 40s. This is the 1930s and 40s, obviously. And plant breeding was one of the things they were doing. And at one point in history, it's no longer the case. The University of California was breeding about 95% of the cultivars used in strawberries. And so once you had methyl bromide, or you had the methyl bromide used to be used in combination with chloropicrin, but once you had that combination, you didn't have to breed for pathogen resistance anymore. And so they were able to double down on breeding for productivity and shelf life and color and size and all these other qualities, both production qualities that growers wanted and consumer qualities that consumers presumably wanted, the color and size. They didn't breed as much for flavor, and they didn't have to worry about this other stuff, right? And they could also start growing, once you had the fumigation, you could also not only grow the crop year after year in the same block, but you could breed the crop, have really long seasons. And so they started, they already had done this, but they were breeding for like short day varieties so they can plant in early spring, and day neutral varieties for a longer season. And so rather than having strawberries be a 3-week crop, as it is in many regions, you can have strawberries in the ground being harvested for, in some places, 9 or 10 months a year.
Wow.
So, which again makes it much more profitable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how they can support the $100,000 an acre crop land out there, is because, you're harvesting, pallets and pallets of strawberries. Now, is it true that when strawberries are harvested, they then are put in a reefer truck and then driven continuously to the East Coast? I mean, it's like a 24-hour trip, right?
I do not know the answer to that question.
Yeah. I was told that, forget who I was told that by. I think it was actually, you know what? I think it was Amigo Bob, who actually was I
know Amigo Bob, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think we were sitting together at a conference in New York when he told me that, just about how that all works, and just how much money came out of strawberry production. Yeah. Now, talk to us a little bit about the impact on workers, because obviously 99% of the California strawberry industry is run by, is it H2A, or is a lot of those locals now too?
H2A is more recent, and I can tell you about that. So, strawberries have never been a good deal for workers. It's one of the most uncomfortable jobs, because up to this point, it's changing now, but up until this point, most strawberries are planted close to the ground, and strawberries are perishable and rot easily, and so they've worked very hard to have a compliant workforce that'll be careful in what they pick, and toss strawberries that are look bad or aren't ready yet, and pick the best ones, and do this quickly. So strawberries are extremely labor intensive, and the more plants you have, I mean, the more productive the plant is, the more labor you need, right? And so, but the strawberry industry, to be profitable, has to have the most compliant and cheap labor force it can have. And one of the problems is there's a lot of that $100,000 it costs to grow an acre right now. I don't know what the exact percentage is these days, but it's probably at least 50%, if not 60% labor. But the rest is, there's a lot of ground preparation before any strawberries picked. So you're already investing 40,000, let's say, an acre into preparation. And so if that strawberry doesn't get picked, that's a big loss. So they really need to have a compliant labor force. So for a long time, U.S. immigration policy worked well for the industry by using a lot of undocumented workers, frankly, who would not complain if there was pesticide violations or wage theft or whatever. And that worked well. And the strawberry industry also, for a long time, depended on people's social networks, their families from coming and going from Mexico. But that, and the other thing the strawberry industry did to reduce or to manage your labor costs is they developed a way of paying on piece rates, right? So rather than paying people out, a flat hourly wage, they incentivize productivity by paying people by the crate, but they still have to meet minimum wage laws unless they're cheating. And so the crate rates are set so that you have to work really, really fast to make that minimum wage. And if you can't make that minimum wage, you're basically laid off. So if you go through strawberry fields, you'll see people running through the fields to pick those strawberries. And they're using both hands. They're going really, really quick and running back to load it on the truck. Anyways, I'm telling you this in part because things have changed, and now the strawberry industry is facing labor shortages in a big way. That's at least one of the biggest complaints of growers. And so I've heard many growers talk about, well, You can't get compliant workers anymore. They just walk off the job. If they see something better, or before they'll even come and work for you, they'll look at your fields to see how many strawberries are on the plant, and if your fields are robust, and they like fumigation because it makes for more bountiful plants. And if they don't like it, they'll leave, or if they do like it, they'll call their friends. And so the workforce isn't as loyal anymore. So the growers say. And labor costs have gone way up. California does raise the minimum wage, no longer allows exemptions for overtime laws. Workers' comp has gotten up. So, the labor costs are real. I don't doubt that. And consumers expect to have the strawberries at quite reasonable prices. So it's not like the growers are horrible here. They're squeezed, but they're squeezed on the backs of laborers. And now they say there's labor shortages. And so now they're depending more on the H2A program, which is a guest worker program, but they don't like that particularly because they have to pay for housing and transport. And so in one area of California, Santa Maria, which is the one area where strawberry production is actually growing in California, a lot of the motels there have been converted into H2A housing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's so important. Now, one of the things in your book, you show just the wide range of places strawberries are grown in California, all the way from up right at the tippity top, all the way down almost to Mexico.
Yeah.
But you have, obviously, Salinas is the hot spot, and then you've got down by Santa Barbara and Ventura. Why the different locations? Are the different times of the year, or is it just all the different areas that they'll grow?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, the main strawberry growing regions are in Santa Cruz County and Monterey County. So that's Watsonville, Salinas, and then down in Santa Maria, and into San Luis Obispo. But Santa Maria it borders like the San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties, and then you have Oxnard. Strawberries are still grown in San Diego County, but it's a very urban county. So those are that's where most of the fruit production is. And yes, you have them in different regions to take advantage of the different climatic advantages. And so in the winter you start south, and then the bulk of it moves northward. But in Salinas and Watsonville and Pajaro Valley, so that's on the central coast, it's still a very long season. They're starting to harvest late March, and I'm still seeing strawberries in the markets now in November. And so they'll have up to an 8 or 10 month season. It's much shorter in Oxnard and kind of more like a 6 month season in Santa Maria. But the map in the book you're referring to also refers to nursery production, and that's a whole nother game, right?
Yes.
Grown in the prime fruit growing regions. For propagating plants, they're going to other regions with different climatic advantages. So, for instance, the starts and the starts, which are done in greenhouses where the strawberries can't touch the ground, a lot of that happens in the far north of California, like in the Lassen area around Red Bluff and Redding, for those of your listeners who know the area. And it's not exactly, well, there is a reason it's there. When they first put it in, when they're first propagating the meristems, they're doing it in an indoor environment, but then they propagate plants in soil, and they do that over a course of a couple of years. And so they do that in up north because it gets really, really cold around October. There's this one area called Medul Valley, which is in the far northeast of California. And that's where they do a lot of plant propagation. And so they'll grow these plants all summer, and then October they'll pull them, chill them, and then ship them down to the south, and the strawberry plants wake up and say, oh, it's spring, it's time for us. They feel the air and they go, oh, it's spring. And so they've been able to shorten that season. They also propagate a lot of plants in the Central Valley, but it's way too hot to grow fruit there, except for a couple months a year.
Okay.
So yeah, so they have different kind of propagation regions depending on when they're planting the fruit.
Now, so you mentioned the methyl bromide and that, but then you also mentioned that they're highly sprayed. Talk to us a little bit about just the amount of pesticides that are going on a California strawberry.
Yeah, I don't have a good sense of the amount. It's not something I looked at closely.
Okay.
I do know that strawberries have an intense regime, more than any other plant. I think it's the number one on the environmental working groups 30 dozen, and it includes antifungals and pesticides, and I think there's 4 major chemicals, but it's not something I looked at closely.
And I think part of the reason is because they are such a long crop. If you're going to run any crop for that long, you're going to have to try to keep them alive and happy somehow. And so just the amount of a 10-month season, I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, I think that's why we can get such a premium price for our strawberries here in Ohio. And I know a lot of other farmers do that are doing U-pick. I mean, because the quality is, because the California strawberry is bred for shipping, not necessarily flavor. We can focus on flavor, and people are just like, I mean, we welcomed to our farm this year over 3,000 people in just 3 weeks. And you're right, it's a 3-week season. It's pretty much done before it starts. And there are days that literally, if you don't gauge the U-pick level right in 24 hours, you're just letting fruit rot in the vine, which is incredibly not good, because it's a waste of a lot of money. So, talk to us about the farmers. So obviously the farmers are doing this if they're making money, but are the farmers really making money, or are they kind of caught in a cycle?
They're caught in a cycle. There's been a lot of shakeout in the strawberry industry. First of all, there's been huge demographic changes. When the strawberry industry was first began in California, in the Pajaro Valley, there was a lot of Japanese Americans in it, and a lot of Anglos, whites in it as well. Many Japanese American farmers have now gotten out, and many white people have gotten out. It's mainly Latinx growers. I don't know the exact statistics. My guess is around 70%. Some who have been in the industry for a couple generations, and some who are former farm workers who somebody came along and said, oh, you're ambitious, you're a hard worker, you could be a farm owner and I'll lend you a lot of money. And then those often people go out, those are people who go out of business first. So it's not as profitable as it was, and you can understand why. I mean, you have these really high land values, and labor rates are getting really high, particularly with shortage. I'm sure they're having to increase their wages at least somewhat. And they're having to think about alternatives to chlorpyrifos now, right? And some of the alternatives are quite costly. So it's not easy. And there has been, there's a lot of turnover in the industry. When I was doing the research, which is now, 5 or 6 years ago, I would say 20-30% turnover every year. Leaving.
So high turnover, which means anytime there's turnover, that means those farmers are losing their shirt, because you're buying new equipment and then selling it at usually a loss.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the thing about strawberries is relatively low entry, which is why a lot of low resource farmers can get into it. There's not a lot of equipment actually, because the fumigation is done. A lot of the services are done by contract. So you have one company, Trical, does all the fumigation. And you probably have a company that levels your land or makes your beds. So that's all done kind of on a lease type basis, but you have to establish a relationship with the marketers, whether it's Fiscal or Giant or whatever. Some of those marketers are like Driscoll's has much stricter quality requirements, and so lot higher cull rates. People are tossing a lot of strawberries that work for Driscoll's. So but they feel a lot of growers say, well, I can make more money for Driscoll's because they pay a little bit more. So, but the point is it's not like, investing in a, $200,000 combine. You can get into the strawberry industry with not a lot of capital, but you have to do it all on loan. So you can lease your land and do all the ground prep, contract with the fumigation company, etc. And so you're just going into a lot of cash debt as opposed to huge capital costs up front.
Gotcha. Joining me is Sash from Harvest Hosts, where they connect over 225,000 self-contained RVers to small businesses such as farms just like yourself. Tell me, Sash, what is the different ways that Harvest Host relationship benefits the farm?
Yeah, so we have a lot of great benefits of becoming a host. One of the main ones is revenue that you'll see back from our members. So rather than an overnight fee, our members actually come in and patronize your business. So whether you have products to sell or a tour or some type of experience to offer, our members come in and 100% of that profit that is spent on site goes back to your business. Harvest Host does not take a penny of that sale. Typically, it's about $50 per night spent. So you'll see if you have 1 or 2 RVers per night and a couple of days a week, that comes out to $10,000 to $15,000 of extra revenue per year, which again, we let that all to you. We don't take any penny of that. We're just here to support small businesses and bring our members to you by spending the night on your property in their RV. It's also a really great marketing opportunity. We have over 225,000 members. All of them are self-contained, so they don't need anything other than the place to spend the night, but you'll get that opportunity to be in front of them with your host profile on our website so they can check you out, see what you have to offer, and come spend the night in your property.
Tell us about some of the farms that are on the platform.
Yeah, some of our favorite farms. We have all kinds of alpaca farms. We have produce farms. We've got lavender farms, really great different experiences. Our members are all about the chance to come and engage and learn your trade and see what you do on a daily basis. A lot of them might live in a city or not actually know where their food comes from. So it's a really engaged audience who's seeking that experience and really excited to learn more about what you do. A great example of a farm that we have is Heard It Here Farm. They're in Cottageville, South Carolina. And their farm store, they see that our members come in and they actually spend twice as much on their products as a non-RV visitor. So it's really cool just to see our members be able to give back and being really engaged and interested in all the hosts that we work with.
Awesome. Harvest Hosts connects over 225,000 self-contained RVers to a network of thousands of small businesses hosts. Hosts simply offer RVers a one-night stay on their property, and in return, RVers patronize the business while spending the night. Visit www.harvesthosts.com/hosts to learn more and become a host today. Now, another thing to look at too there is the buyers set the price, right? Is there a market price? How does that work? Because I know that's another thing with when you're selling wholesale, it's kind of what the market dictates. And some of the years you can lose your shirt, other years you can make money.
That's exactly right. The buyers set the price. And there's different kinds of contracts that the buyers have with growers. I mean, I've heard of custom contracts where they just pay them a flat fee. I think that's pretty unusual. So most growers are subject to the spot market, which the buyers set. And the buyers, have to struggle too, because, in March, April, strawberries, are the first fruit coming into season, after everybody's eaten apples and oranges all winter. But by June and July, when the peaches are in, and all the stone fruit, then strawberries are at their peak in terms of productivity, and there's a lot of competition. And so that's when prices come down, and that's when they start taking a lot of strawberries and putting them into the freezer market for food processing. Yeah.
Well, I don't think Driscoll's is hurting for, profit. I mean, they did
Driscoll's does really well.
Yeah, $2.6 billion in 2020.
The buyers, the shippers do really well. But the farm, the Driscoll's doesn't doesn't farm any land. The only land they run is for
Research and R&D.
exactly.
Wow.
Breeding,
So,
yeah.
all right. So growers do all the risk, and Driscoll's takes, well, fair amount of the profit. Yeah. I mean, it's good for Driscoll. It's not good for the farmers.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about organics, because obviously organics is a key aspect. And I know a lot of people have interest in that. Talk to us about like what's happening with organics in California, especially related to strawberries.
Okay, well, so one of the responses to at least threats of having no fumigants, even though you can still use fumigants, is growers have tried experimenting with organics, and strawberry growers, and some have been in organics for a long time. I'm just focusing on strawberries for a second, if that's okay. And
Yeah.
Organics, yeah. Okay. So, but there's really different ways of growing strawberries organically, right? So, there are, kind of more, die-hard organic growers who use integrative farming methods, who are composting or using cover crops and all that. And strawberries, they have highly diversified systems, and strawberries are one of several crops, if not 50 crops they grow in a season. And so they're able to rotate strawberries with other crops. Strawberries like brassicas. Brassicas like broccoli and cauliflower have mild fumigation properties.
Okay.
So if you plant a season of broccoli or cauliflower, but they actually prefer broccoli before strawberries, those will control some of the pathogens. So you can grow strawberries in this organic system, but you don't grow them year after year in the same block. And the economic model is from growing organically and often doing direct marketing. So that's how you're staying in business. A lot of growers who are not doing diversified systems are also experimenting with organics. Some are trying non-fumigation techniques like anaerobic soil disinfestation, which, as far as I understand, has had mixed results. Anaerobic soil disinfestation is also abbreviated as ASD, is when they use a high carbon source like rice bran or molasses and put it into the soil and flood the soil and then put plastic over it, and that curbs a lot of the soil pathogens. It's resource intensive, water in California. So some have tried that. Some actually will do terrible practices, which is find new ground. Maybe it's been pasture and plant strawberries, and when it gets infested, they just leave it, which is not really great practice. And and some have used mustard seed. I mean, there's other things, or steam they're experimenting with. Some of the growers who are growing organically but still keeping a monocrop of strawberries, they're rotating them every 2 to 3 years and fallowing them. So different practices, or maybe they only, only 20% of their acreage is organic. So anyways, different practices, some more sustainable than others. But the best way to grow them without pesticides is in the diversified farming systems, but that's very hard to do in super high value areas like Salinas, like Watsonville, where you're competing with housing for your land.
So what is the status of those highly diversified farms that are growing like organically strawberries? Are they starting to grow, or are they being phased out? I mean, is too much competition?
Steady. I mean, the ones I know of, I'm a farmer's market shopper, so I see the same farms year after year, and I know who's in it and who's not. from that perspective, they're doing okay. I mean, I think what's happened with organics more generally is there's been kind of this bifurcation where you have those people, those who have kind of always been more dedicated to diversified systems and at least some direct marketing are able to still charge fairly high prices. I mean, prices to keep them in business. It's not like they're making out big time, but they're keeping in business. And then you have all the other folks who have gotten into organics because a buyer asked them to, or because they saw a hot market, and they're kind of going in and out with particular crops as prices seem good, and using more input substitution methods. They tend to go into crops that are easier to grow organically.
Absolutely. Now, you've recently started doing some new research about tech and their investment in food and agriculture. Talk to us a little bit about your research there.
Yeah, so so I got interested in tech in part through the strawberry industry, right? Because one of the solutions that strawberry growers were looking at as a way to deal with soil-borne pathogens is growing without soil, right? So putting strawberries in soilless substrate, and often growing in trays, so waist high, which is an interesting advantage for workers. If you can pick strawberries waist high, that's a lot easier than bending over and running through fields. So I got interested in that because it's like kind of the first step to greenhouse agriculture, and also because the strawberry industry is so bitterly upset about labor costs. They're also looking at robotics, which are very difficult to develop for a very fragile fruit. So that's what got me into tech. But I was also just, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was just curious. And I went to one of these pitch events that are very like the thing they do is they bring together. And they don't only do it for agriculture and food. I mean, this is the Silicon Valley model. You bring together new entrepreneurs and have them pitch their things. I went to one of these around food and agriculture, and I was floored by it. I was just floored to hear all the things that these people were saying. That was like, oh, you don't know that doesn't work. It's like, oh, we need to make farmers more productive. It's like, we want to make farmers more profitable. It's like, well, are you aware that maybe they're not profitable from being more productive? That's kind of what the technological treadmill that keeps putting growers in a bad position. So I was really kind of struck by these techies who had come into food and agriculture calling it underinvested, actually saying, oh, it's underinvested. We need to go. And it's not underinvested. As we know, there's been technology in food and agriculture for hundreds of years, and serious food technology for the last 100. So I was really fascinated by that. And so I put together a grant and a collaborative project looking at Silicon Valley's forays into food and agriculture. It's our project is like cross-sectoral. We try to look at what Silicon Valley can bring to food and agriculture, but there's many other researchers, colleagues that are working on different aspects, whether it's alternative proteins or big data. I mean, that's a big one in the Midwest in particular, because all the equipment is gathering data, precision farming on steroids. So and CEA, controlled environment agriculture, is part of it. So there's a lot. And so I think our knowledge is more like a little about a lot of things and then a lot about a few things.
So with that research, then, are you looking at the vertical farms? You're more looking at the autonomous harvesting?
That's what I'm saying. We're looking a little bit at all. I mean, we're really looking at what Silicon Valley claims it can do for food and farming. And so like we've gone to, maybe 100 of these pitch events, and you asked me at the beginning how I do my research. Well, these events are fascinating. And it's one of the things we find fascinating about the pitch events is how startups, entrepreneurs, like they begin with a big problem. It's like climate change, resource use, food security, big, the biggest problems in food and agriculture. And then they say, but here's my solution. And the solution is this, like, maybe it's a sensor. Determine if
Yes.
there's a pathogen in your food. Maybe it's lighting from controlled environment operation.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a new kind of recycled protein bar. I mean,
Oh
so
gosh. Yes.
right. And so there's a lot of like big talk about the big challenges. A lot of what they're doing is actually pretty mundane. So that's been super interesting. And the stuff that's not mundane is the stuff that's the most controversial, like, trying to ferment protein from CO2 or cellular meat, or all these other kind of moonshotty technologies that may or may not work, may or not be appealing to consumers, may not actually be environmentally better than the existing alternatives. That's where the talk is. It's like, oh, we're going to completely transform the food world. We're going to decouple it from land. We don't need this. And yet that's a very small proportion of the sector relative to a lot of mundane technologies that are really not much new.
Yeah. Now, are people investing in all of this, again, stupid stuff, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. I mean, when you go to pitch night, they're pitching to venture capital, and venture capital, they don't expect for every company to make a lot of money, but when they find one, they expect to get it, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of what they're pitching for is to please venture capital, because venture capital wants like highly impactful technologies, but they also want to show that you're going to be profitable in 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's not clear who's making money actually. Obviously lots of turnover there. It's a startup sector, so there's going to be turnover. But I mean, word on the street is no one's really making money. And so I think, this is just a kind of a hypothesis I've been working with the last week or two, but I think the value proposition is that they're depending on a kind of scarcity to come. And, they're thinking eventually we won't be able to produce food the way we do. And so then we'll have the solution. But, I don't know. Because I don't buy for a minute that a lot of these precision agricultural technologies make growers more profitable. They get a new gadget, and so they can look at a field and get information from the artificial intelligence that tells them something about the field, so they can maybe water it a little bit less. I mean, can figure that out without that huge piece of equipment.
Well, I think we need to go first back and look at the whole premise that California is the breadbasket of the U.S., or not the breadbasket, just the food basket, the vegetable basket, maybe. And I think that, we're looking, there's so many other problems with California right now. So to add these little tweaks to make it so much better, I think we're trying to, as they say, I forget who originally said this, we become very good at hitting the bullseye on the wrong target.
That's a good one.
So, I think that's the thing. We really should be, if we're focused on regional food supply, California could actually turn most of its acreage back into rangeland, which would be way better. And you're not going to have the problems you have in California right now, with they're literally running out of water within a few months. They don't like to talk about it, but they are.
Yeah. Well, it rained this week. We're very happy, but
that's good.
But it's interesting what you say that, because I was just reading a book about digital farming and big data, and I was thinking this doesn't really apply to California at all, because it's not like there's not commodity crop growers in California. There are, but there's not a lot of it. And this, the kind of what precision farming can offer, particularly in terms of big data analytics, that are sourced from thousands of farms. That's not going to help a strawberry grower, or a citrus grower, lettuce grower. And so what California wants in terms of the growers was they want robotics, right? They want to automate labor. They want solutions to, they do want alternatives to pesticides, as they should. They do want the kind of biological alternatives, but this paper I just wrote finished this week, they're not, that's like not very much of what's coming out of Silicon Valley. A lot of it are the digitals, and a lot of them aren't even really supporting farming. We built this entire database, and a lot of the solutions are just like, Airbnb type applications for like use of kitchens or tractors. I mean, they're not, or they're like,
oh, wow. Yeah.
digitalizing farmers' transactions. I mean, they're not even about addressing real problems.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of like, oh, we're from Silicon Valley. We have this application. What problem can we solve?
Yeah. Well,
Right.
Farmers are always a hot topic because they feed the world. And so everyone's like, I'll just do something with farmers and it will look good on my resume. Oh my gosh, you created this new sensor for a farmer. Well, fortunately, you're right. It was just literally to put that on the resume. Interesting. All right. So your book again is called Wilted, the Pathogens. I'm just scrolling through it right here. Pathogens, chemicals, and the fragile future of the strawberry industry. And wrote that in 2009. And you said you had a paper
2019 it came out.
2019. Yes. And any more books on the horizon for you?
Yes, I'm working on one now called The Problem with Solutions. It's about the very thing we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
we have a bunch of articles on the tech sector, but this one will be geared more toward a broader public. And it's about this very thing, coming up with solutions for problems that don't exist or that are completely mismatched, or what you said, which I really like, which is you hit the bullseye for the wrong target.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, anything else you'd like to share before we go?
That's good. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I feel like we covered a lot.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of it is negative or just hard news to hear because there's so many problems broken. And I hate to end on that. And I guess the only thing I would say is this is just another reason why small local food systems are where we need to be headed. And you should be growing, the food for your community.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks for having me on your show.
I appreciate you coming on. All right.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Hey, Thriving Farmers. Here's a quick heads up to save the date, December 1st through 4th, for our Thriving Farmer Summit, Value Added. If you're looking to add income to your farm with simple, proven strategies, go to www.farmsummits.com and drop your email. Our summit series have been viewed by over 100,000 farmers and get rave 5-star reviews. In this summit, we'll share detailed strategies for farm ferments, herbal foraging, tinctures, pickles, farm kitchens, foodscaping, mushroom jerky and mushroom kits, developing add-on shares for your CSA, how to publish books with your farm story, starting your own USDA processing plant, and starting a farmer co-op. Over 35 speakers are sharing their wisdom. Go to farmsummits.com to reserve your spot today. So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.